protein sparing modified fast, high protein, prioritize protein. There is a huge trend right now in the carnivore and keto space, even in the low carb space, to push this way. While I do believe that there can be great benefits for some people, there is a potential downside to eating more protein than your body actually can process. So in this video, I'm going to break this down for you, so stay tuned. Welcome back, my friends. My name is Sarah. I am known as Carnivore Yogi. Thank you so much for being here and clicking on today's video. Today, I am going to talk with my guest, Elliot Overton, and I will link all of his information in the show notes for you guys about the potential pitfalls and downfalls of eating more protein than your body is able to process. Now, if you are not new to my channel, you perhaps know that this happened to me, and Elliot and I do discuss this in the very beginning of our discussion here of how eating more protein than my body was able to process actually did put a strain on my kidneys. Now, Dr. Rob CYWES, who I respect and have had on this channel a couple of times, actually just put out a video on his channel a couple days ago, which I will link in the information section below for you guys, speaking on this same topic. After looking at blood panels for hundreds and hundreds of people, he is seeing the same issues that Elliot and I spoke about that I also had a couple of years ago when I was eating a lot of protein and not enough fat for my body. Now, I am not as fanatical as I was probably a year ago about the protein thing. I am under the belief that it is very individual and we can each get away with different amounts of protein in our diet. And I don't believe people should try to limit and eat small amount of protein per day unless they are really trying to push ketosis for some sort of a medical condition, which is not most people that I am working with. But after really working with a lot of people myself, talking with Elliot Overton, which I will put that video clip here in just a moment, as well as my experience with my own blood work and seeing it change and seeing it get better in regards to my kidney function by reducing the amount of protein that I was eating, I do have some thoughts on this matter. So I will link that blood work video that discusses my BUN, creatinine, and my GFR in the information section for you below as well, so you can kind of draw your own conclusions. But at the time of that blood work, when I realized I was having reduced kidney function, that definitely scared me. I was probably eating the majority of my calories from protein and not as much fat. So I was probably eating more around 60% of my calories from protein, 40% fat. So not even purely as high as you would eat on a protein sparing modified fast or a PE diet. So again, it's all very individual. So that being said, I'm very excited about the sponsor of today's video, which is Let's Get Checked. You can use my code, which is Yogi30, and get 30% off of any lab test that they offer. Do it from the comfort of your home. I will link the kidney test in the information section for you guys because I have gotten that kidney test a few times over the last year and a half since that initial blood work that really did scare me. And I didn't have a ton of symptoms when I got that blood work. I did occasionally have excess urination. I did occasionally get a puffy face, which I think was also electrolyte issues, but not a lot of major issues, just that initial blood work. And so I think it's important, as Dr. CYWES says, and as Elliot Overton says, to know where you stand with your kidney blood work. This is not something, again, as Dr. CYWES says, and as Elliot says, that we want to prolong, that we want to keep this reduced kidney function going on in the body. So it's good to test, see where you are. You may have no issues at all. This super high protein thing might be amazing for you. But if you have any suspicion, test and don't guess. Use my code Yogi30 at Let's Get Checked. And let's jump into this conversation I had with Elliot Overton. Make sure you subscribe to his channel and check out all of his work. All right, guys, I'll talk to you again soon. All right, guys, thank you so much for coming back and tuning in. I'm really excited about today's guest. Elliot Overton is, I feel, an expert in this field, and I have a lot of interesting questions to ask him today. So thank you, Elliot, for being here today.
You're perfectly welcome. Thanks
Yeah.
for having me.
Yeah, if you don't mind, before we jump into questions, can you talk a little bit about your background and expertise? I know a lot of us have just kind of binged watched a lot of your videos that are in the carnivore and keto space, but would you mind talking about your background just a little bit?
Yeah, of course. I'm a nutritionist based in the UK. I have done some training in what's called functional medicine. I'm not a medical doctor, but I am interested in how we can apply nutrition in the context of chronic disease and how people can try to improve their health via natural methods. So I tend to work with a lot of people who are on carnivore diets or ketogenic or animal-based diets. This has been the case for 3 years or so. So I have I have a particular interest in this myself. I've followed these kinds of diets for a long time. Before I started working with people with this dietary preference, let's say. Over the years, I've kind of honed in on some of the key issues which I often see people have in this regard. They might do these kind of diets and then either they don't feel benefits or they feel some benefits, but things are holding them back, or they actually get worse. So I'm interested in kind of why that happens and how people can try to troubleshoot that in various ways. And yeah, I guess that's kind of an overview.
Wonderful. Yeah, that's exactly why I wanted to bring you on, is I feel like you've really worked so hard to try to understand why people run into specific problems on these types of diets, because I think they are very helpful to do. But then how do you help the people when they just have, these kind of chronic issues that we'll start to talk about today?
Yeah, indeed. Yeah.
Cool. Well, the first question, and these are kind of for people listening, not in any specific order, just kind of what came to mind when I was sending Elliot some questions. I wanted to talk about having high blood urea nitrogen, high creatinine, people that are concerned about the strain on their kidneys from these diets. And then I know we often see a low EGFR, and just kind of what your thoughts are on that topic.
Yeah, okay. So you have to take this for what it's worth. I'm not a medical doctor, as you know, and for all the listeners, this definitely isn't medical advice, but I'm sure your listeners know that already. I just have to kind of preface what I say with that. Okay, yeah. So this is something that you have seen.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I had it myself, and now I've corrected it. But I had it after a year of carnivore. My BUN was out of range, my creatinine was high, and my GFR was down to like a 60. And I was terrified. Yeah, I was very, very worried about this. And then, of course, I put my blood work on the internet, and I got trolled by a bunch of vegans. And then they were saying things like, I hope Sean Baker visits you when you're on dialysis. And it was really scary. Now my GFR is a 110 and everything's in range and I'm in a good spot. But it's always kind of been in my mind of like, this happens to a lot of people that I see, and I want to know why, and then what's the best way to help them.
Okay, and just before we go into that, I'm kind of curious. You found a way to address this, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And is that public how you did that?
Yeah, I stopped doing a super high protein carnivore. Yeah. That's what I was doing, was I was trying to do more of a high protein, low fat approach. And I had to really work hard on my electrolytes as well, because my electrolytes, I was very dehydrated. Yeah. And I also have worked a lot on healing my gut as well. So those are the main things that I did. And now my numbers are all really good.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, that kind of relates to what I was going to kind of say to a large extent. With people who go on animal-based diets, if you look at various markers, you've got BUN, which is blood urea nitrogen. It's basically your total pool of like nitrogenous waste, which is primarily derived from protein, right? So it's consistent, or it's kind of logical to assume that the more protein someone eats, the more breakdown products of the protein they may have in the blood. So when you break down protein, you kind of liberate lots of different things. You liberate ammonia and nitrogen, etc., and you generate higher levels of something called urea. And now urea is generally part of one of these kind of panels. So if you're measuring urea in the blood and you see that that is high, well, that can be simply because someone is eating too much protein. It doesn't necessarily mean that they have some kind of a metabolic, major metabolic issue going on.
Right.
So it's important to kind of, I guess, consider that the blood work of a carnivore is likely going to be different to the average person. And that's where a lot of the research and the understanding of physiology is based on, is an average person on a balanced diet. So when you're looking at a diet which is primarily protein, like a high protein diet with fat and very little or no carbohydrates, then things have to change, and we have to kind of account for that. So you can't apply the same rules to one group as you can to another, to some extent. So with regard to some of these markers, okay, you look at urea. Well, urea can be slightly elevated. It can be on the high side, and that's not necessarily a problem. That can mean that someone is just eating too much protein, or if they are, let's say, if they bodybuild, if they lift weights, if they do strenuous exercise and they're breaking down protein, muscle mass, and they're building it back up. This, again, theoretically could be one of the reasons why they see high urea. So that alone as a standalone marker is not necessarily all that informative. If you couple that with BUN, well, again, BUN protein is providing nitrogen for the body. Okay, we need to get rid of that. And so nitrogenous waste is toxic. We generally don't want high amounts of it for prolonged periods of time. If someone has kidney failure, they have very high levels of BUN. That's a really bad thing. But if it's ever so slightly on the high side, again, it can tell us some information, but it's not like diagnostic. So for instance, the BUN, it can just tell us that someone's eaten higher protein, or they are, they've been training hard or something like that. So those two markers, they're not necessarily problematic if they're ever so slightly on the higher side. When that's coupled with what is an estimate, it's called estimated glomerular filtration rate. That's probably one of the best estimates of kidney function that is available, to the wider public. Well, this is where it can be kind of important, as per my opinion. So GFR is meant to be above 60. Ordinarily, if you're sitting at around 60, that's still not great. Yeah. I like to see it anywhere between 90 and 100 or 110 kind of thing. And so if you notice, or if someone notices that they have high BUN, they have high urea, and they also have low glomerular filtration rate, and they see that happened after going on a ketogenic diet or a carnivorous diet, well, that is potentially a problem. And that kind of needs some investigation. So what I see this like really frequently. And for these people, oftentimes they don't have any other kind of signs and symptoms of a genuine like metabolic problem. They've no history of chronic kidney disease. They've no history of like liver disease, anything like that. They're generally, relatively speaking, healthy people, but they just have these really strange kidney markers, which have all of a sudden come on since they've been doing this crazy diet. Now, ordinarily, if someone looks at that and, it's understandable if they might conclude that this diet is unhealthy for them. And I would say it might be true, but it might be something a lot simpler, like what you've said. So first of all, it's important to note that glomerular filtration rate, what I understand about it, I'm not a specialist in kidney function or anything like that, but from what I understand, that fluctuates depending on various different factors. So you can measure GFR one day, and then you can measure GFR 1 or 2 days later, and it can fluctuate. So it can be on the lower side of normal, it can be on the low side, but then it can go higher again. And one of those, one of the factors which is going to determine a GFR is hydration. Okay, so if someone is dehydrated, that is one of the reasons why GFR can drop. Okay, at the same time, GFR is quite sensitive to acidity. Now, if you have been a vegan or you follow the vegan kind of standpoint on dietary protein, or you've bought into any of the conventional kind of dogma around dietary protein, they will say that protein is unhealthy for the kidneys because it's high, because it's acidic, because it does provide an acid. When it's broken down, it does provide acid for the body, and the body does need to excrete that. Now, there's lots of different mechanisms by which we're kind of maintaining acid-base homeostasis. So the balance between acidity and alkalinity. One of the ways in which we're doing that is through the kidneys. And so ordinarily a perfectly functioning kidney can quite well kind of maintain the balance between excreting acids and bases and whatnot, and maintaining kind of a relatively stable environment. However, the kidney is somewhat susceptible to excess acidity. So one of the ways in which the kidney can counteract that is by secreting bicarbonate. Okay, bicarbonate is an alkaline substance, and what that helps to do is basically balance things out. And so in some cases, like you have kind of clarified through your experience, and like what I've seen on numerous other occasions, is that someone who has low GFR, high BUN, and high urea might just be consuming a little bit too much protein. Okay. Yep. And that might not be coupled with their activity levels, with their kind of anabolic catabolic balance kind of thing. So if this particular kind of person is not working out heavily, if they are not kind of doing anything, providing stimulus to the muscles, which are going to kind of tell someone to build muscle, then and sometimes people, if they don't like eating fat, if they've come from kind of like a low fat diet, they can quite easily overeat on protein. And because of that, what I think one of the reasons why GFR goes down is because of the kind of excess burden the kidneys are placed under by having to deal with the nitrogenous waste, the acidity, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a couple of things that I have people do about this. I mean, one is to ideally reduce protein if I kind of think it is a little bit too much. It kind of depends. You have to do the calculation with each different person. I can't think of it off the top of my head. But one is making sure that someone is not eating excess protein. Secondly, looking at potentially providing if it's highly concerning for that person and they're concerned that they've got kind of chronic kidney disease or kidney failure, it's really uncommon. But if they do think that, one way in which the researchers have done it in the past, and I use it in people who do have ongoing kidney issues, is actually to supplement with bicarbonate. So this could be either sodium bicarbonate or potassium bicarbonate. So the research is fairly conclusive that in chronic kidney disease, bicarbonate is a massively protective factor when it's supplemented, and it slows the progression. And I've seen GFRs go from 50 or below 60 to 80 in the space of, a month or so of supplementing with a quarter teaspoon or half a teaspoon of sodium bicarbonate. Really, that's going to depend on someone's urine pH. So one of the ways that you can kind of assess whether the acidity or acid base imbalance is potentially driving an issue with the kidneys is actually by looking at urinary pH. So you can get just a basic test strip. You can look at your pH levels, and what I like to see is ordinarily between kind of 6.9 and 7.5 kind of thing. Okay. So ever so slightly towards the alkaline range, but more kind of neutral. What you'll often find is people who do have this kind of lab work, their urine is going to be kind of 5.6 or below 6 or in the low 6s. And I find that this is also really, really helpful for people with gout. And that's something that kind of is its topic in its own sense. But carnivores who have this predisposition towards gout, using sodium potassium bicarbonate is really beneficial for kind of reducing gout attacks. Oftentimes their urine is highly acidic. So if you can bring that up to between 7 and 7.5, maybe, then what you'll often find is that the lab markers do tend to improve. Something else with regard to carnivore diets and poor kidney function, like a temporary worsening of kidney function. Well, one of those is theoretical, but I guess it probably could apply. Is one of the things which is known to reduce kidney function or GFR is advanced glycation end products. Okay, so this would usually be applicable for people who are on kind of standard Western diets, who are consuming high amounts of fructose. sugars, refined carbohydrates, polyunsaturated fats, like industrial seed oils, advanced glycation end products are going to be a major problem. But it's also theoretically possible that this might also apply on someone who's on a carnivore diet, whose antioxidant system is not functioning kind of as it should do. Let's say their endogenous system to protect against advanced AGEs, the main thing there being glutathione, that's the main cellular antioxidant. If someone is not maintaining good glutathione status on a carnivore diet, and there's a couple of reasons why that might actually be, if they're not maintaining good glutathione status, then it's entirely possible that that over the long term, say a year or 18 months, that is going to start affecting the kidneys. The kidneys are massively or extremely sensitive to oxidative stress, and that's one of the things that the AGEs can do to the kidney to cause kidney damage. And in that case, what I also like to do is, if someone has done if they've tried to optimize their hydration, so their electrolytes, potassium, magnesium, even calcium, and sodium, if we have tried to look at that front, we've tried to do kind of the alkalinity stuff with the sodium bicarbonate or potassium bicarbonate. We've reduced protein, and they still have problems with their kidney function. I would then start looking at kind of glutathione status, some antioxidants, which are really useful for the kidneys, particularly alpha lipoic acid, MSM, NAC, and raw glutathione, so actually liposomal glutathione as a supplement sometimes. There's also a very good herbal formula, which is called Rentone. Rentone, it's made up of several different herbs. I can't think off the top of my head exactly what they are, but I've seen that bring up EGFR quite significantly by 30 points or something. One other thing that I would think about is that if someone, and this isn't just any kind of ordinary person, but if someone has a history of consuming very high amounts of dietary oxalate, for instance, green smoothies, copious amounts of dark chocolate, copious amounts of gluten-free grains, or flours like almond flours, lots of nuts, seeds, etc. Very high oxalate foods, I would be concerned, or I may be honing in onto that, because what you do often see is that as someone is dumping oxalate, then they do go through periods where their GFR drops massively because of the sheer amount of damage that oxalate does to the kidneys. That is usually a temporary thing. So that will kind of fluctuate based on where they are kind of in their cycle and everything. But yeah, the kind of main points I think I've touched on, or what I would usually look for. At the same time, I would also want to try to get someone to have their medical doctor or their primary care physician within the picture, just so that they know what's going on, so that they can investigate. Maybe they'll want to do like a kidney ultrasound or something like that to find out whether the issue is anything more sinister.
Yeah, I actually went to my doctor after I got all the comments from the vegans and got a kidney ultrasound, and they were looking at my blood work and they're like, why are you even here? It's not that bad, because they're so used to seeing things way off the charts. But I was just concerned. What do you think if someone has this type of blood work prolonged? Do you think it's going to lead to an issue if they just get blood work like this and it stays like that and gets, they keep it for a long time? Or do you think it's not going to be a problem?
I think, well, the kidneys are designed to be clearing stuff from the body. If that stuff isn't cleared, then that can cause some kind of damage, right? It's not very good. But at a low level, I mean, the body's pretty resilient, right? So it can deal with a lot for a very long time. When kidney function drops like massively, where it's like 20, then that's a medical emergency kind of thing. I don't like seeing low GFRs, so I always like to try to promote the kind of, I like to get people's doctors on board so that I'm not responsible for guiding them through that, because that can be a medical emergency. It can be something which is something more sinister underlying. But generally, I I don't know how to answer your question. I think it's probably not optimal, but I don't
Right.
think it's going to kill someone if it's ever so slightly on the low side. It's just really you would want it. You want your kidneys working as good as they possibly can be. It's like the liver. You know, you want
Yeah.
all of these things working. I don't think it's I don't think it's going to cause any like permanent damage or any serious damage, but over the long term, maybe it does. I'm not sure.
Okay, that's fair enough. Yeah, I know so many people have this. And so I wanted to just cover that because I know a lot of them are going to say, well, what if I just ignore this? And if I, keep the markers like this for a while, basically what you're saying is work with your doctor and maybe keep an eye on things, right?
Yeah, exactly right. Look for the root cause. So understandably, if your physician doesn't know or he's not interested in looking or he wants to take you off the diet, I mean, it's possible that this diet doesn't work for everyone, right? And that does seem to be the case. But then again, it's also possible that it could be something very simple. It could be dehydration. It could be that you're not consuming enough sodium, you're not having enough potassium, you're not retaining water. And so you're chronically dehydrated. That's really common. It could be that you are, if you've got digestive issues, if you've got chronic diarrhea, for instance, then also you could be chronically dehydrated. If you, you smoke, you drink, you live like an unhealthy lifestyle generally, and you come into contact with a lot of junk, which kind of has a depleting effect on your protective chemicals, the antioxidant system, then again, this is something which could predispose one to developing kidney issues. So it's like, look at all of these factors, reducing protein, playing around with your macros, all the things that we've spoken about. And if it still doesn't improve, I would probably consider, like, if there's no identifiable cause, I'd consider maybe playing around with the diet a little bit more, experiment with maybe adding in some carbohydrates or some fruits or something like that, which take you out of a state where you're primarily relying on meat, on animal protein and on fat, give you a little bit of food elsewhere. And if it improves, then I would say, okay, well, if that works for you, then continue doing that. If someone sometimes people become obsessed with one diet, and even when it actually works against them and it's detrimental for them, they want to stick to their guns and follow it through to the end. I don't advise that kind of approach.
Yeah.